Welcome to Bat Therapy, psychology of Batman, superheroes, and other comic book characters. Be a fly on the wall or a bat in the cave, listening in on a friendship built out of a love for talking Batman, comics, and the everyday struggle to achieve mental health and happiness.
We are your hosts, clinical psychologist Dr. Amelia Brown and educator and comic aficionado Keaton Hopkins. Don't forget to follow us on YouTube and social media and find our Patreon at patreon.com/battherapy.
This podcast is about providing education and understanding and is not a replacement for mental health treatment or support. If you're needing help, go to bat-therapy.com for resources. I was going to sing the national anthem, but you know what popped in my head instead? Oh, Canada. And I was like, wait, that's not right.
It's a better song.
I blame Bill. I blame Bill because F1 was in Montreal this past weekend. So
I'll be completely honest. The 4th of July is a strange holiday for African Americans who definitely were not freed and had no independence when that day was established. You know what I mean? Like it's
that's
one
an
of those,
awkward turtle moment.
it is. It's like, because even the Star Spangled Banner, like I want to say, like, there's another verse in there that has some pretty messed up things in it. Like it's not, yeah, like it's very funny, like looking at like how many of the forefathers were slave owners, and their fighting for freedom was, we don't want to pay taxes anymore, but they were completely fine with owning human beings. Happy 4th. Enjoy the fireworks. Cook hot dogs.
In honor of 4th of July, in honor of Independence Day, and in honor of how violent and awkward this holiday is, let's talk Homelander.
There we go. Let's do it. Today's going to be very interesting because I don't really know what to do with my vocabulary. You know, throughout this this podcast, I have been learning not to use words like psycho or crazy.
Those are really easy labels to just kind of pull.
Right.
Yeah.
But the person we're doing today, I don't know how to describe them without using those words.
Yeah.
Today we're doing Homelander from The Boys. We're not doing the comic book, but we're focusing on his character from the Amazon television series.
And I remembered Homelander, but then you go back and you watch it again and you go, oh.
Am I allowed to say unhinged?
Oh.
Is that one allowed? Because oh my God. Like, oh.
So he is a compelling kind of person when it comes to when is violence based on a person and when is violence stemming from mental health related things, and asterisk, big bold letters, nice reminder. I don't think we've done this reminder in a while. Mental health does not lead to someone being violent. In fact, if anything, you're more likely to be the victim of violence when you have a mental health diagnosis. So, big, bold letters. Mental health does not equal violence by any means. There's a lot of conversations here in the United States that really misconstrue that and are incorrect. But you can be violent and have mental health stuff. And so there's a lot going on with Homelander.
Yes.
Yeah, there's a lot to delve into here.
Yeah, and it's so funny because when they first introduce him on the show in the first episode, they almost set it up like Homelander is the only good hero among all these other flawed ones. And then at the end, you realize, oh my God, he's the worst one.
Surprise!
Yeah, it's like, oh no.
And this is why Batman has contingency plans.
Right. This is exactly why.
He's essentially Superman gone very, 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 very wrong.
That's exactly what it is, and honestly, it was still still man-made. They it was
Yeah.
still one of those things that it's like, is it on him completely?" No, because when you look at how they made him and how, like, so many people lied to him about his
Mm,
past and who he was, and how he was basically raised in a lab and experimented on his
mm.
entire life,
Like,
like
terrible, awful, horrible experiments where he learned that that's how you treat people,
right,
and that's how
and
you
he
treat innocent children, let
yeah.
alone us adults who have, done done bad things.
Well, and honestly, one thing I like about The Boys is, like, it shows the difference between a character someone plays in front of cameras
Yes.
versus who they are in real life, and
Yep.
it honestly scares me when I think about, like,
Mm.
politicians and movie stars and musicians, like,
Mhm,
their
mhm.
persona on social media
Yep.
and on television and everything versus who they are off the camera. Like, watching this show makes me terrified to meet any of my heroes.
Yeah, it's very interesting in this show how, from the get-go, they really hone in on how eh, you're sadly, you're kidding yourself if you think that being a hero is what matters. So at
Right.
first, it's this layer of, well, popularity. Popularity points are what reign on high. And that tends to flow throughout. But even so, like at a certain point, you even find out that superheroes aren't really the end goal either. It's this whole pharmaceutical
Yeah.
end game. Like yeah, it's there's so much deception, there's so many layers, all about perception like you're talking about. It is tough and it also you have these layers too where Homelander, he's putting on a show for everyone else. He also puts on a show for himself. There's
Yeah.
like this there's this really cool scene where he's talking to himself in a mirror and it they're almost playing off of kind of that sense of, like, if you dissociate, and almost like your identity splits, but they don't really hit on it in other places, but I really think they're trying to play off of this fact that he's even trying to fool himself,
Yeah.
and he even has personas for himself that, um, it's hard to keep those perceptions up.
And, a lot of the time, some of the stuff he does because of it almost seems like he's a child throwing temper tantrums at
Mm.
times. It just so happens that this temper tantrum, he's extremely powerful and has complete ability to destroy mankind if he wanted to.
I would
And
agree that managing his anger so that it doesn't turn into pretty extreme aggression would probably be useful for him.
I think that's the number one thing any superhero should do. Like, listen,
Mm.
there's a
Mhm,
very
mhm,
thin line
mhm,
between
mhm.
being a hero and being a villain. It's a very, very
Yeah.
thin line. And even from the beginning, it's like this world, they let you know right off the bat, oh yeah, these superheroes they have the public has no problem with these superheroes killing people. Like they have no issue with it. Because even the first thing
Yeah.
you see Homelander do, he just throws a robber up in the air. He throws him so high that they have a full conversation before he just lands through a car. Like, oh god. Um, so yeah, it's very, very interesting. I love the concept of The Boys just because, like, it basically shows, like, in a real world, there's not quite any such thing as a hero, and it's funny
Mm.
because the the fish out of water is Starlight because she's
Yes.
trying to actually be a good person.
Yeah. And even as the seasons go on, the people that have been the good guys, they get more gray and she still tends to stand pretty strong. Um Yeah, Homelander, you're very right. When it comes to having these powers, it highlights the importance of emotion regulation.
Yeah,
So, emotion regulation essentially being we're not talking about emotions being a bad thing. They're actually really useful. You can't just get rid of them. You can try. It doesn't go well. And it's all about how do you feel what you're feeling in a way that doesn't end up perpetuating more issues for you or for the people around you. And
Yeah.
Homelander, um, to be fair to him, he never really got an opportunity. People always wanted things from him, and they did terrible, terrible things to him for a while to get there.
Yeah.
And then as an adult, they weren't abusing him anymore, but everyone was manipulating everybody else. He's never seen anything different.
Yeah, and he evolves a lot in this show because it starts with him just wanting to be the persona that they want, and it
Mm,
slowly shifts to him realizing, like, "No, no one can tell me what to do. Like, no one. Like, it's like something snaps in him, and he realizes, like, okay, I don't have to take anything from anyone. And at the same time, he still wants to be loved by the public.
mhm.
And he's kind of willing to do just about anything to do it because I mean, but throughout the entire time, he's still being manipulated by people. In
Yep.
season one, he gets manipulated by Stillwell. In season two, he gets manipulated by Stormfront.
Ah, yes, the
Um,
Nazi.
yeah, oh, unhinged. I can't say certain words about them, but oh my god, that's all I'll say. Oh my god. By the way, if y'all haven't watched this show yet, um, check it out if you're over 18. Check it out.
Be
If
really
you're
mindful though, if you find if you're triggered by pretty much any
yeah,
if there's any kind of violence that's triggering for you, it's going to be in there.
The Boys is rated hard R for every single reason to the
Yep.
maximum.
Yep. Yep.
Like to the
So
whatever
just be
reason
aware.
something can be rated
Yep.
R,
Yep.
dial it up to 10.
If you wanna watch it, but you know you get triggered by stuff, just make sure you've got that fast forward button in your hand ready to
Yeah,
go.
yeah. Language, sex and nudity,
Sexual assault,
violence. Yes,
violence,
all of it.
abuse, all sorts of
All
abuses,
of it is there. All of it is there.
herogasm.
Oh my god.
Herogasm
Sheesh.
is great.
Yeah, that's the name of the episode, and it's exactly what it sounds like. Yeah,
Giant
like it.
winding penis.
Yeah, it's just
You can't unsee
yeah.
that.
You can't, like, I know we're yeah, it's hard to talk about just Homelander without realizing the world that he lives in and
So
being like, "Yep, that'll do."
so that's the thing that's important, and I mean, we've talked about it before, but an environment is really, really important to keep in mind. The tricky thing here, though, is that someone who has a certain level of popularity and is recognized by the public, there can be this confusion in terms of what he interacts with every day is different than what all of these people who quote unquote know him deal with every day.
Right.
But all of that gets blurred. They feel like they know him, so they don't realize he's in this separate world. And he's only known this screwed up way. And so he probably doesn't fully take in everyone else. But really the only way he takes them in is he kind of sees everybody else as ants. You
Yeah,
know, he does not see at one point he even talks about being a different breed. I mean, he
yeah.
really sees this separation. And so this is the world I live in, and he has the powers to really not have to worry about what happens outside of the rules that he is in, except if he wants popularity.
It was funny, and I know we don't do too much politics on this podcast, but it was funny, the creator of The Boys at one point, he couldn't believe it, but, like, a lot of, like, a hardcore like, a lot of hardcore, like, right-wing
Mm.
people loved Homelander and were, like, obsessed, like, "Yeah, he's the hero," and, like, he literally had to come forward and be like, "Homelander is not the good guy
Well, you know,
in this show."
he reminds me of Donald Trump.
Yes. Oh, and they definitely leaned in on that,
Mhm.
in the following seasons. They
Yep.
really leaned in on
He
on
started going
that.
with just, like, his open rhetoric and not, there's something very tempting about being unfiltered. I mean, you were talking about what words can I use for this? I don't want to be potentially offensive to this group of people. And that, sometimes, let's be real, it can be frustrating or confusing or complicated to try and be respectful to other people. And so it can be, we all, I think, get tempted at times. Like, wouldn't it be nice to just be able to say whatever the hell's on your mind? And that's, it. No ifs, ands, or buts, no sugarcoating. But oh man, does Homelander really show you if that's what you want, you're gonna get a lot of other stuff that come along with it.
I've always loved when people say, like, they use he says exactly what's on his mind as a positive thing, because
Mm.
I always think, I'm like, this sounds like someone with no tact whatsoever. Whenever
Mm.
someone says he speaks his mind as a positive, I'm like, there's no telling what you're about to hear. Like, whenever someone says that about something, like, man, he speaks his mind. It's like, yep. And what exactly is his mind thinking?
Well, and
Uh,
and and that's the
yeah,
thing that, we wanna be able to do what we want and what's in our best interest, but that is not re unless you are the most powerful person in the world like Homelander, and by the way, even then, he has all these powers, and he can't have everything he wants
right.
if he just does anything he wants, because,
Yeah,
like you said, he wants popularity. He doesn't wanna be alone. He wants people to truly wanna be with him, not just because 'cause they're afraid.
right.
That means he has to filter himself a bit.
Yep. Yep.
So, no matter who you are, no matter how powerful you are, if you try and do everything just for yourself so you get everything you want, you're going to affect the people around you, and it's impossible for everyone to approach life that way because 'cause you're gonna step on everybody in the
And one
process.
Yeah, and that's one thing that makes it so interesting too, because he is by far the most powerful character on the show,
Mhm.
but they show you just how human he is
Mm.
when it comes to the things that he wants. Like, when he finds out he has a son, he's super excited about it.
Mhm.
Like, oh, you lied to me and said I couldn't have kids, and he takes that aggression out on them. And, like, wanting to be loved by the public, how appreciative he is of Stormfront. And it's just,
He chases love and acceptance. He
yes,
desperately wants it,
yes,
and yet he's so angry and hurt that he pushes it away
yeah,
constantly
yeah,
because he has Starlight right there. Once again, she's the most heroic of anyone, and he makes
yeah,
an enemy out of her
oh yeah,
in fairly quick fashion. I mean, he had someone there that there would be an opportunity where she could actually see past a lot of stuff, if he was willing to set aside some of this this really intense stuff.
yeah,
But yeah, I mean, he's always chasing it. He chases it with Stillwell. You see it with the jealousy he has of her baby and this like weird kind of motherly sexual exchange. They seem to really love Freud and like this question, like Oedipus complexy kind of thing here.
yeah,
And then he has Stormfront, who he gets really connected to, and then he's like, "Oh, and but she's a Nazi, and I don't really go." She's even too extreme for him.
right.
And then you have Soldier Boy, and he has a son, and there's all this striving for that essentially the unconditional love that supposedly a family brings you, and unfortunately he's never able to find.
Oh my gosh, can we please get Jensen Ackles on this show to
Oh,
just talk
I
to us
wish.
about Red Hood and Soldier Boy,
And
two
Batman. He's
characters,
been Batman
and Batman?
too.
Yeah, that's right. Like, he just, oh man,
I
talk about
know.
nerd royalty, Dean Winchester himself.
Yes. Oh,
Oh
we
my
could talk
god,
supernatural too.
I know, like, but yeah, seriously. And honestly, it was really funny watching whenever we saw Homelander interact with Soldier Boy, and when
Mhm.
Soldier Boy finds out that Homelander is his son, And then on top of that, he's disappointed in him. Like,
Yep.
oh, I have such a whiny baby for a son. I'm like, oh my gosh. Like Homelander can't catch a break. He doesn't
Yeah.
deserve a break, but he can't catch.
Doesn't catch it.
But he
He doesn't deserve
cannot catch a break.
I
And it but he just
I
yeah.
but he hadn't done anything to Soldier Boy. You know, there are most people in the world he does not deserve a break from. But Soldier Boy, so Soldier Boy, yeah, is like very old school, like men are men, don't show your feelings,
Yeah.
drink yourself
Yeah.
into misery silently kind of
Yeah.
thing. And Homelander, Homelander, he doesn't really have that as an option.
Yeah.
He hasn't learned how to manage those emotions that are there, which Soldier Boy's way isn't the solution, but yeah, he can't hide how he's feeling. He even tells his son at one point that he cries.
Yeah.
He's like, I don't do it very often because I'm a man, but I mean, still, he acknowledges crying, which is actually one of the few good things he does. Um, but yeah, Soldier Boy and him, that's a very unfortunate combination because Homelander was not going to live up to his expectations about what a man looks like.
Yeah. And it's really like bizarre watching him like attempt to interact with people because
Mm,
there's no one close to Homelander that actually likes Homelander. They're all terrified of him.
yeah,
They're
yeah.
all terrified. The only one that isn't really terrified of him is Giancarlo Esposito's character, and it's such a good scene because he's like, "We made you. Like, I'm not a we're not afraid of you. You're being a petulant child." And it's so interesting hearing it because I'm like, "Bro, you do not have superpowers. Do you realize who you're talking to right now?" Like, I was scared for him in that scene because this comes after we saw what Homelander ends up doing to Stillwell when he
hmm
finds out he had been lied to for so long, which, oh my god, what a I can't get over how gratuitously violent this
It's
show
terrible. It's terrible.
is. And like, yeah, the only one he thinks is his friend is Black Noir, and then you get to season 3, and then he even finds out Black Noir lied to him about
Yeah.
something, and he kills him as well. And
And
so
so here's the difficulty about the world Homelander lives in is that he keeps he doesn't want to he wants to leave that world, but he doesn't. I mean,
mhm,
because he's all a part of the deception, and yet he's not able to objectively separate himself when it's close to him, and
right,
understandably so. I mean, there's a lot of trigger points with him about he was grown in a test tube and not treated kindly by the people who raised him, and those kinds of hurts can really stick with a person and can be hard to
right,
find a way to heal. And so I think that's why Noir's betrayal, he wasn't able to set it aside because even at a later point tells people like, I killed Noir and he was better than single one of you. So don't think I won't kill you too.
yeah,
And yeah, that part is very sad because I think he could take a lot of manipulation from Noir, but that was the one thing that he would not be able to let go.
yeah. And it's interesting because in season 1, watching him interact with any of the female characters is interesting as well,
Mm.
specifically like Starlight and Maeve.
Uh-huh.
Because he used to, I guess, be in a relationship with Maeve, and even after they're not together anymore, he's still extremely controlling.
Oh yes,
He's still
very
yeah,
controlling
and like
person.
to the point that it's scary. And he hides that part of himself from Starlight
Mhm.
for a really long time. Like it's because even whenever the seven are meeting, he's on his best behavior and all that. And it's later on when Starlight finds out, like, oh wow, he is just as horrible, if not worse, than the other ones because immediately from the first episode, like the very beginning of the first episode, we're like, oh, the Deep is a terrible person, and Translucent is a creeper. We
Mhm.
don't know anything about Black Noir, and we don't know what happened to Lamplighter, but he's
Yeah.
retired.
We know
Um,
A Train's not
right. Oh
clean.
God.
Mhm.
Literally not clean.
Oh, yeah, I didn't even mean it that way. I just yeah, I meant
Oh,
yeah, his
but oh my God, what a way to open what this show is gonna be. Like him just like that was such a violent scene when Huey's girlfriend dies. Like it's like, oh
when it
wow.
started coming up, I literally turned and, like, blocked the screen with my hand. It was like, "I don't remember exactly what happens, but I know something is gonna happen that I don't wanna see right now."
What's funny is when you watch it, because I watch a lot of stuff with subtitles, and
Oh, no.
you see her talking and all of a sudden you see half a word and I'm like, uh-oh. Like something she doesn't finish this sentence, and I
I
think
thought
we
you
know why.
I thought you were gonna say it was like splooshy noise or sound of a
Squanch.
person ripping
Like, right?
apart or
Oh, yeah,
like,
the way they
"Ooh,
describe it, like, the descriptions are, like, always bad, like, steps in squishy puddle. Like, "Oh, what is the puddle?" Like, it's yeah,
ugh."
it's yeah,
It
but
this is
that's what
a
The Boys is.
yeah, this I mean, it's a very bizarre world, and it's all Homelander's ever known, and actually with his son, um when he finds out he has a son and he finds the woman who for anyone who doesn't remember, hasn't watched it, she's human. Um, when he finds them, he's actually really upset with her, and to his credit, has conversations with her without killing her or maiming her in the moment. Still, um, still someone you would probably be frightened of, just imposing in his way of doing it. But still, he has a good point about she's essentially keeping her superpowered son from the world, and her son does not realize that there's a whole big wide world out there.
Mhm.
And it's I don't think Homelander can fully take in the differences between how that would hit him versus his son
Oh, yeah,
because
I
his
didn't think
son
about that because
actually
he was raised kinda, like,
he
away
was
from the world.
so
Yeah.
he talks about like this is exactly how I was raised, and so I'm a stickler for language because it's so important in how we talk to ourselves and how we talk about perceptions, how you perceive things. Language is important. So it is not exactly the same. There are some
Yeah.
very important distinctions. You
And
have a very
yeah.
loving environment. You have a very unloving environment, but they do have this one thing in common that he can't get over, and it's like you can't just protect him from the world. This is a lie, and it could destroy him.
Mhm.
And I thought that was a very I don't remember where I was going with that, but
Well,
I thought
and
that was
it's
very
well,
interesting.
one thing that's interesting too is from the very beginning, the moment that Homelander put on the costume and became Homelander,
Mhm.
he was put in a situation where he quickly realized, "Oh, it doesn't matter what I do, even if I screw up, they'll cover it up, so I can do whatever
Mm.
I want." And you find that out in there was an animated series um
Oh.
called Diabolical,
Uh-huh.
set in the boys universe, and there's an episode I cannot remember the name of it, but they did say it was actually canon, and basically what it is, it's all about Homelander's very first mission.
Mm.
And he goes in with like Black Noir, and there's like some eco terrorists, and he makes some mistakes and kills some innocent people,
Mm.
and uh and he loses his temper and he ends up killing everyone, and he actually feels like, "Oh my god, like, I screwed up, I messed up here, what's gonna happen?" And immediately, Black Noir's like, "Oh," like, he basically kinda, like, changes some things up, and long story short, because I can't remember exactly how it goes, but basically, he realizes, like, "Oh, this is all fake, they just lied, and now
Mm.
I'm a hero, and so I can do whatever I want, and it's fine." And
Perception.
yeah, and then something similar happens with the flight when they jump in to try and stop the hijacked plane,
Yep.
and then he just lets the plane go down, which, oh my god, what a scene. Like, oof, that was
Yeah.
brutal to watch. And then later on, he's like talking to the camera, like, this is so heartbreaking. I can't believe it. It's like, oh, oh my god, I
The
hate
US
you.
government should have let us help and then this wouldn't have happened. It's like, dude, you were
Yeah,
there. Yeah.
right.
And that's the thing is that he I mean, things go to a whole other level with him because he's not just manipulating things and not just layering things on for perception because he has these powers. And so he's also very much strong arming people.
Right,
Um, that being said, there's a lot of strong arming going on from like from Vought, from the
right,
pharmaceutical company in terms of
right,
um
right.
they pull a lot of strings. It's just more emotional or having to do with material
Mhm.
things or your popularity points,
Right,
your pride, versus his has some of that, but he's got an easy option in his back pocket of like I could burn two holes through you with my eyeballs.
right, right. And it's funny because like he's so powerful and Vought constantly tries to control him, but they realize they just can't. Like
Yeah,
they're like, "Oh, we made a deal with this mayor," and at the end of the first episode, he just goes and blows the mayor's plane up, and they're like, whoa, why'd you do that?" And he's like, "Because I felt like it was the right thing to do." And it's funny because you can compare it to things we go through every day. Like there might be
mm,
an abrasive person at work, and it's like, why did you CC them on that email? It's like, oh, because I was like, I thought that was the right thing to do. Like, whatever. And you take a situation like that, and it's like, if we did this with a superhero, that's what it was. It
yep,
was like I took things into my own hands, except it was blowing up an airliner and
yeah.
like, right? And so it's just,
Well, and the thing is some of those things are going to have to be in that superhero hands, right? Because it's happening in the moment. There's no way you could ask for approval and have things go through a chain of command.
yeah,
Like in the military, a lot of times, like chain of command, and um, but yeah, yeah, it's very very interesting because like you do wonder if he can kind of empathize with people. And at some points, they kind of allude to, some like kind of a leaning of like psychopathy or, can he really relate to people? Maybe he doesn't care. But then on the flip side, he does seem to care. It kind of seems like maybe he's got like some like antisocial personality disorder kind of things where
hmm,
like he doesn't really follow the rules. He tends to be very manipulative of people. A lot of it has to do with the fact that he has trouble managing his own emotions and responses and reactions to things. And so it comes out in ways where he essentially goes and he tries to control the people around him.
right.
But it's also all complicated because like he is different from everyone.
Right. Now, I do have yeah, and I do have a question. I do have a psychology question
Yeah.
for you. Because narcissistic personality gets thrown around
Mm,
a lot in today's age. Like
yes.
you could be like, "Oh, I don't like my boss. They have a narcissistic personality." Or, "Oh, this
Mhm.
person just stood up for themselves and I didn't like it. Narcissistic personality." Like,
Uh-huh.
that one gets thrown around
It does. Yep.
a lot.
Mhm.
My question, does Homelander have a narcissistic personality? Or is it narcissistic personality disorder? I guess. Is it
Um,
are those two different things?
yeah, so that's a really good question. So when it comes to being narcissistic, so everything kind of falls along a continuum. Any trait a person might have, it's there are, you can have a little bit of a trait, you can have a lot of it. So narcissistic personality disorder is essentially when people say someone's narcissistic, they probably mean there's some of these traits, but the personality disorder is at the extreme where it's it's inflexible. It's a part of who you are no matter what
Right.
situation you're in. And so
Mhm.
you think really highly of yourself. You tend to look less highly in other people and see yourself as above them. Um, Feeling is believing that you are superior, expecting other people to treat you better than others.
Right.
Um, Really might be really critical of other people, take advantage of others. So there are some things there. Here's the hang up where I think I think Homelander is more antisocial personality disorder kind of traits than narcissistic personality disorder. So antisocial,
Mhm.
you have like a person te- tends to not really follow rules and laws.
Mhm.
They also might have kind of a manipulative feel to them. Um, they will often kind of be very reactive. They might be very
Okay.
imposing. And a lot of times they're struggling with their own emotions, but they take it out on the people around them.
Okay.
And so the reason I lean toward that is okay, yes, he thinks he's better than other people and he wants to be treated differently and he sees himself as superior. But there's also, like, some pretty clear evidence that he is very different from people, and given his powers and everything, I think that lends a kind of uniqueness to this where, like, he might kind of act a bit narcissistic, but he also has always been treated differently his entire life and is in fact different. And so
Okay. I see
you
what
know
you
what I
mean.
mean? So that
Yeah.
part kind of plays a role where I don't know, if narcissism is what I'd throw on him. And I did catch kind of how you were, talking about that, and yes, people overuse this term.
They
This
do.
person's, like, narcissistic." It's like,
They do.
well, I
Right.
mean, are they just proud of themselves
Oh, yeah,
or
you see it, like, all the you see it, like, all the time, like, people, like, "Oh, they disagree with me, so that's gaslighting," and it's like, that's not what
yeah.
that is, right? Like, they terms get misused a lot, and so,
Oh,
like,
yeah. Oh, yeah.
I hear narcissistic personality so often, or they're a sociopath. I hear it so often, whether it's in true crime documentaries or on Instagram or TikTok, where someone's just talking about something and they have no idea
Yep.
what it is they're saying. And it's
Yep.
yeah, they're like, honestly, I'll say it, they are Wikipedia psychologists, right? Like they
Yeah.
just like they
Yeah.
think they know what they're talking about, but in reality, the information
Mhm.
they're spreading can be very, very harmful
Yes.
because they don't know what
Now
they're talking about.
Now, I 100% agree with you. And there also are also people who maybe have gone and done their own work and then they find out through that process maybe like, "Oh, how I grew up was not normal." Or how my parent, some people talk about like I started realizing this thing about my parent or this person in my life or whatnot. Like there are times where people realize like, oh, this might be a factor I wasn't realizing. Um, but we kind of yeah, we kind of undervalue how important those things are if we overuse a term. It's kind of like when people are wanting things a certain way, they're like, "Oh my god, I'm so OCD." Well, first off, you mean OCPD. You
Yeah,
mean obsessive compulsive personality disorder, which is more like a perfectionistic thing.
right.
And that is also once again like an extreme end of things and
Yeah,
OCD is, a specific set of symptoms and a
right,
diagnosis with treatment. Yeah.
right. Or yeah, and, oh yeah, that's another one too. So many people will be like, "Oh, I'm so ADHD," and it's like because you
Uh-huh.
looked at a TV that was on, like
Yeah.
that's not
Oh, my favorite is
yeah.
Adderall worked for me, so it's like, well
it's a, it's a stimulant. Like it's like
you're
I'm
gonna
pretty
notice
sure.
something, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Tylenol works on you too. Like it's yeah, it's one of those things that is
Yeah, you feel
funny
caffeine
whenever
too.
they're
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
it's like yeah, caffeine works on me. Like I don't know,
Yeah,
built
usually
hashtag
people
built different. Right,
Usually people with ADHD, they take Adderall and they're like, "Hey, I can function like these people over here. I've never
right,
been able to do that before."
right, and it's like, yeah, it's funny because, like, as someone that did get diagnosed with it and is on medication for it, like, it's always funny hearing literally everyone you meet be like, "I'm pretty sure I am too." And I'm like, "Okay, nice. I didn't bring it up, but alright." Like, I just I guess that's what we're talking about now, right? Like, it's just it comes up, like, super frequently, like, it's people yeah,
Oh, I
so
read this interesting art this is getting us totally off topic, but I read this interesting article. I think it was actually Great Britain, but we, I'm sure, have similar issues here. But essentially, they've got like I think a nation-based program that evaluates for ADHD, and they do the tests, they do the self-report measures, all these things to make sure that, they're getting things right. But they have a long waiting list. And so then there are these private companies where you can spend a ton of money to get their evaluation. And essentially, a lot of them, they're only spending like 45 minutes talking to you. They don't do any evaluation and they give you an ADHD diagnosis. So there's unfortunately a lot of ways that misinformation can happen, and it can
yeah.
even happen well-meaning physicians who just don't have the training, but they want to help people, or um, companies wanting money, or their information gets around in a lot of different ways.
So, is it can I say that alright, so because getting back to Homeland, because you
Yes.
said he exhibits traits of, antisocial personality disorder, correct?
Yeah.
Now, hearing that and knowing that he was not raised around people,
Mm. Mhm, mhm.
is that something that can be a cause? Like, is the
Mm.
definition that much on the nose? Like antisocial personality disorder? Like, oh, they were raised in solitude, and so now they have
Yeah. So, when it comes to there's kind of a grouping of personality disorders that have similarities to one another, and so
Mhm,
narcissistic personality disorder tends to hang with antisocial personality disorder, also borderline personality disorder, which is another one where there's trouble with managing strong emotions,
right.
and so in this one, you tend to have hot and cold relationships.
Mhm,
There might be like self-harm or a lot of suicidality. So sometimes it kind of turns more inward in some ways. There's also histrionic, which is uh, kind of like you see a lot of emotion from a person, but it seems to all be kind of a facade or on the outside.
mhm,
I don't want to say facade, that seems judgmental. What's a better word? Like it almost seems like it's a mask that a person's putting on, and you don't really get to know the person underneath.
right,
So these tend to kind of hang together, and while it's not a necessity, there often is quite a significant trauma history that tends to
right,
happen. A lot of trauma does not equal having these. Doesn't mean you will have them, but if you experience these symptoms that line up with these personality disorders, there tends to be a lot of trauma. And actually, I want to pause here because I might be having some bias here where one of the one of the kind of issues that can come up too is narcissism and antisocial personality disorders. We tend to say we more likely diagnose men with those, and
mhm,
then women get histrionic and borderline personality disorder. And so, you know, I'd have to actually. I haven't really sat down and looked at it, but I mean, he definitely doesn't care about the rules, and that's why I was thinking of the
yeah,
antisocial. Um, but his relationships do zigzag back and forth a lot, like
yeah.
borderline personality disorder, and so he might have kind of a combination of things going on.
Interesting.
Mhm.
Okay. Interesting. Very yeah, and my favorite I always like I feel every time I talk to someone about this podcast and they're like, it's interesting. And I'm like, right? Because I feel like I'm just sitting here. I feel like I learn so much every time we record. I'm like, oh my God, what? Like that's great. Like it's It's very interesting because I've never thought about the fact that like other things, there can be a spectrum when it
Mhm.
comes to personality disorders. I'm like, either you have it or you don't. Like that's what I thought, but it's okay. It can be mild, right?
Yes.
It can be mild or it can be extreme. Like it can,
Well, and also just in terms of how we diagnose and how we talk about these things, even the mental health field tried to shift more and more into, hey, let's try and not be black and white, like you have it or you don't, and look at that spectrum. Um, one reason being you can it can kind of separate us, and it's like, oh, you guys over there have that stuff and we don't. When I have a touch of narcissism to me at times on a bad day, I'll admit it. We can relate more to people if we're on like a spectrum with them. It's like, oh, okay, I'm just at a different point, but I can relate to some of the things that you're experiencing. And then also, just because you're not at the far extreme point doesn't mean there aren't things that you might want to work on. Or, if you're on a spectrum, you can see progression and progress more than if it's like, do you have this? Yes or no?
you know.
So yeah, I don't think it's just lay people, non-mental health people, but even in our fields, it's been more and more of a focus of like research and even like diagnostic stuff to point out how it's on a spectrum.
So what you're telling me is that we should not be taking BuzzFeed quizzes to figure out what personality disorder we have. Is that what you're telling me?
Correct. But I have nothing against finding out, which Harry Potter house, unless you have an understandable kind of hesitation with Harry Potter stuff because of who
So,
you'd be
all
promoting.
right. So on topic, because I'm pretty sure that Homelander would be in Slytherin.
But
When I have take when I've taken the test, I've gotten
uh-huh.
Ravenclaw, and when I have taken the test slightly inebriated,
Yeah.
I always get Slytherin. So, I constantly wonder which one is true because I have a habit
Ah.
of telling the truth when I've been drinking, but
Mm.
it's it's one of those things. It's just
So,
fun.
okay, let's talk about psychometrics a bit.
Psychometrics. Oh, that's a new word.
Psychometrics. So, here's the thing with these tests. A lot of the tests that you see, they probably have very poor psychometrics. So essentially, there's there's a science to creating tests. And this is a huge oversimplification. And hopefully I'm remembering my details well enough so that my undergraduate teacher of the professor of this would be like, "Oh, well done, young Padawan." Um, so when it comes to the art and science of creating these tests, you want two things: reliability and validity. Reliability is, when let's say there's something that shouldn't change over time, your answers and the responses, they should be consistent over time.
Like
So,
control.
yeah, so you wanna make sure like, you're talking about, "I take this test at different times, I'm getting different answers." Is there an issue with reliability there? Or is it something you would expect to change over time? And then there's validity. Are you testing what you expect to test? So, reliability is when I shoot the arrow, I hit the bullseye every time. Validity is when I shoot every time, I'm actually hitting the bullseye. I'm not hitting another random point on the board, and I
Mhm.
just think it's the bullseye. And so, with tests too, um, you tend to take samples of people so that you can group the different answers and say, okay, well, here were a bunch of Slytherins, they took the test, and so here are the responses Slytherins have.
Right.
Here are the Hufflepuffs and how they answer the test, and there's going to be some variation, but generally, does your pattern of answering fit with which one? Um, so I mean, it's a good question. I guess it depends. Like when they created that test, were people drunk when they took it, or were they sober? So that was a long
Right.
roundabout way of getting there. But if they created their sample for how do you answer based off of what answers would we expect from a Slytherin who is sober versus who is drunk? what we expect for a Ravenclaw is sober versus drunk because you might answer things differently based on those things. So
Yeah.
these are fun escapades into psychometrics. So yes, anyone listening to this, you are given surveys, you are given tests, you are given things where you're given results. It's always good to ask yourself, does is this something that seems like a high quality test, or is this more like I go on the internet and I find out I'm Ravenclaw versus Slytherin?
Right. So if you take a online quiz about which character from the boys you are, do not be concerned if you get Homelander. You're going to be okay.
The rest of us, maybe not so much, but you will be okay.
You specifically are fine. If anyone else gets Homelander, you should worry about them, but you're fine. You're
Yeah,
fine.
yeah,
Just go
yeah.
about your day, get your Starbucks, go to IHOP, do whatever you need to do. You don't have anything to worry about, and you're going to save the world. But the rest of us, yikes.
Thanks for nerding out with us. I'm clinical psychologist Dr. Amelia Brown.
And I'm educator and comic aficionado Keaton Hopkins. Check out my TV and movie reviews on YouTube at Team JVS. Check out our website at bat-therapy.com, our Bat Therapy YouTube channel, and follow us on social media. And don't forget our Patreon page at patreon.com/bat therapy. See you next week. Same bat time, same bat channel.